while they're travelling on UK roads. In the city a short time ago, the FTSE 100 was trading up 23 points at 73.70. The pound buys $1.19 and just under €1.15. LBC weather, rain easing across northern England but continuing for eastern Scotland, which could be heavy at times. Brighter for Northern Ireland and some southern areas, a high of 12 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Simon Conway.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
Good morning, 6 minutes after 9 on Friday, November the 18th. We're waiting for the Chancellor Jeremy Hunt to appear on the show. Meantime, we will be looking at some of his announcements yesterday, including this about EVs, or electric vehicles.
Half of all new vehicles will be electric by 2025. I've decided that from then, electric vehicles will no longer be exempt from vehicle excise duty.
And, of course, we'll be putting to him the question put by Martin Lewis in the previous hour concerning mortgages. In other news, that Twitter story you've just heard on the LBC News, Elon Musk now shutting some staff out of their offices. Why are so many people who, of course, relish and enjoy, good luck to them, enjoy being with the liberal media that is Twitter, 133 million followers for Barack Obama, nearly 9 for Gary Lineker. Why aren't they quitting in protest?
Yesterday was the deadline for employees to respond to this extraordinary email, which said they could either agree to work hardcore, and he warned that it would be really intense, or they could accept 3 months' pay and leave.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Busy man, we're waiting for the Chancellor to arrive at the LBC Westminster studio, so let's continue our conversation about pensions and that triple lock. Richard in Chiswick. Richard, what would you say to that? Good morning.
Yeah, just one specific point. I may have misunderstood what you were saying, but you made a reference to Alan Sugar getting the pension or something like that. I don't even know if he's pension age. He probably is.
He is pension age.
The point is that, as you will know perfectly well, pensions are taxable income. So if Alan Sugar got the 10,000 quid or whatever it is, the state pension, he'd pay 45p in the pound, assuming he's a higher rate taxpayer. In other words, he's going to lose half of it. And in that sense, it is means tested. It's a cheaper way of means testing income than looking at the situation before the person gets the money and sort of excluding them, if you see what I mean.
All I'm looking at, and obviously I have to reflect all groups of listeners on that programme, when people who are younger and who are possibly now desperately struggling to pay their energy bills and their rent or their mortgage, and there's not, I would argue, the same level of help or protection, how fair is that, Richard?
I'm not talking about fairness. I'm simply making the specific point that pensions are taxable, and therefore a higher rate taxpayer will be paying roughly half.
No, I hear you. But
that's all.
Should they be protected while others are not?
Should who be protected?
The triple lock. Should that still be in position? I know they're taxed.
Look,
but people are paying more tax down the wage scale as well.
You had Baroness Altman, I think, was her name. I don't want to get it wrong earlier. And I thought she made good points, which is basically pensioners have contributed the whole of their lives. They've worked, generally, and the pensions in this country are not particularly high by most standards. So, I don't resent people in their 60s and 70s getting £10,000 a year.
Richard, I'm grateful. Thank you for that. David in Hampstead. David, you're on the more broad reaction. What do you want to say? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Great show. As a business owner, I've voted Conservative since 2010, since I was old enough to vote. It's always been good for business. It's always been an opportunity to grow. This budget is pretty much a death sentence for huge numbers of businesses. I mean, I run a small, medium-sized business. I employ people, corporation tax up from next year, fuel duty up 23%. Everything's up, and I mean, I think I can't remember which newspaper it was that said it was communicated like George Osborne, but the policies of Gordon Brown.
Daily Telegraph.
Yeah, and I think that's correct, because I think all Jeremy Hunt is doing is he really is He's going beyond making pip squeak, as Gordon Brown said. He is really going to squeeze a lot of businesses out of existence, because this is not Conservative. And to be honest, the next election, if there was an election tomorrow, as someone who has always voted Conservative, to be honest, I'd probably just tear up my ballot paper or say, do you know what, let's give Labour a chance. Because to be honest, I never thought I'd even say that. But this is not a Conservative government, and it's a shame.
What is the straw that's broken the proverbial back then? What is it from yesterday that particularly rankles, would you say, David?
For me, it's probably two main things. The corporation tax rise, I think that's one for business. I know that wasn't strictly yesterday, but that's one that is a hammer blow for businesses, particularly now when a recession's coming or is here. Okay. And the second one is nothing to encourage businesses to grow.
Well, let's put some of that directly to the man involved, David. I will say, sorry I have to cut you off, but I will say welcome to Chancellor of the Exchequer Jeremy Hunt, who joins me now, and I'm grateful to you. It's a very busy morning. Chancellor, if I read you the headlines of the first 3 pages of the Financial Times, very relevant, I'm sure you'll agree, on a day such as this. Page 1, Hunt paves way for years of pain. Page 2, households braced for largest fall in living standards since records began. Page 3, parlous state of public finances laid bare. Chancellor, what does that say to you for 12 years of Conservative stewardship of the nation's finances? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Look, it's very important that you had me on your show this morning, and I was listening to the final part of the conversation you were just having from someone who runs their own business, which I used to do for 14 years. And the fact is, if you look at the last 12 years, to answer your question directly, we've actually had faster growth than most of the other major countries, Japan, France, Germany, Italy. But we have had some very big international shocks. We've had the pandemic, which is a once-in-a-century occurrence. We've had the war in Ukraine, which has caused a massive hike in international gas prices. And I want to answer very directly the question that was being asked by your previous caller.
That was David, so you can reference him. His name is David. Go ahead, Chancellor.
David. Well, sorry, I didn't hear the start of the conversation, but
that's my job.
Let me answer David's question very directly. This is a very Conservative set of measures, because people choose Conservative governments because we face up to difficult economic decisions. We do the things that are right in the long-term interests of the economy and the country to help businesses. And when we have these shocks, for example, energy prices costing us £190 billion a year. That's about the cost of an extra NHS having to be absorbed by the economy just because of the rise in energy prices. They want to know that we've got a plan. And one of the problems that's facing us is that because of inflation, we're seeing our debt interest increase to huge amounts, and all businesses know the first thing you have to do is to balance the books. And then what families want up and down the country, and this is going to encourage them to buy things from our pubs, our restaurants, our small businesses, is they want to know that we're going to control these huge rises in the cost of living. So this is a plan that brings down inflation. It tackles the huge rises in energy prices, and it sees us through to the other side. So all those headlines from the Financial Times, they are right. These are very tough times.
Chancellor, I have allowed
but they're
you,
also solutions, and that's what I've announced.
I have allowed you to answer at some length. Chancellor, you referenced COVID. Britain locked down on March the 23rd, 2020. So we almost had all of Q1 for that year. You referenced the Ukraine. That's just over 9 months ago. I point again, 12 years of Conservative stewardship, way before COVID, way before Ukraine. You can't blame this on coronavirus and Vladimir Putin, please.
Well, I think I answered that question very clearly. If you want to talk about 12 years, let's talk about 12 years. The third highest growth in the G7. We've done really well compared to other countries in the last 12 years. And why have we done well, Nick? It's because we've taken difficult decisions. Decisions, by the way, that were opposed not by you, but by the Labour Party, the
third highest inflation rate,
Party, and many other people. But we've taken those decisions, and that's what we're doing now.
The third highest inflation rate in the whole of the European Union.
Well, inflation is higher.
If we're going to quote numbers, I can quote
back.
Yeah,
let's quote numbers, actually. Inflation is higher in the Netherlands, Germany, Austria, Italy,
Right.
Tax rises are higher in America.
France 6.2, the United Kingdom 11.1.
Yes, France has a lower inflation rate. France is controlling it's having to introduce controls on the amount it borrows. The growth projections have fallen by 50% more in Germany than they have here. So there is an international, a global economic crisis, a global energy crisis, and people at home understand that. And what they want from a Conservative government is a government that says, look, well, this is a really difficult situation. We're going to deal with it. We're going to sort it out. And that's what we're doing.
You've referenced the Conservative and a Conservative government. If I point you to some headlines in very much Conservative newspapers, the Daily Mail, Tories soak the Strivers, and Sarah Vine, one of the columnists who I'm sure you know well. And there was me thinking we'd voted in the Conservatives. The Daily Telegraph, the rhetoric of Osborne with the policies of Brown, and The Sun, tax hell, thank God for the footy. All those three newspapers, I'm sure you will concur, are Conservative supporting newspapers. Why are they all wrong and you are right?
For a very simple reason, that people vote Conservative, yes, because they want low taxes. I want low taxes too. But most of all, they vote Conservative. Can I answer this, Nick?
Go ahead.
Most of all, they vote Conservative because they want to know that we're going to look after the economy, look after their savings, look after the pound in their pocket. And when you have inflation at 11%, the first thing that Margaret Thatcher did, Geoffrey Howe did in 1981, was not to cut taxes. They actually put up taxes because they said, we've got to tackle inflation. We've got to have sound money. And that's a very uncomfortable message for all Conservatives, including me, because we all want lower taxes. But the truth is, sound money matters even more. And what the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility said yesterday is that because of my decisions, inflation will fall further and we will get sound money back sooner. And that really matters for pensioners who are worried about their weekly shop skyrocketing, for small businesses who are seeing the interest rate on their loans go up, for families who are worried about their energy bills. They want to see the cost of living brought back under control. And I think as a Conservative Chancellor, the Conservative thing to do is to take these difficult decisions. And yes, that means a lot of very uncomfortable headlines. But I think people want me to do the right thing.
Let me ask you one thing. If the Office of Budget Responsibility is correct, and fuel duty is expected to rise by some 23%, adding approximately 12 pence to the litre of fuel, of petrol and diesel. Why was there no mention of that yesterday, Chancellor?
Well, they are independent and they have to...
so it's not true.
Right. Sorry, can I just answer it? They are independent. They have to make judgments, but they were wrong to assume that we are going to increase fuel duty because we have not made a decision on that. That is a decision for the spring budget, and we will make that decision at the right time.
So at least for now, we can knock that one into the long grass, Chancellor.
Well, I think you can accuse me of many things, Nick, and we've known each other pretty well over the years.
We have known each other.
Kicking difficult decisions into the long grass is not something that people will say that I'm someone who does.
But this headline, my listeners can relax, as in they must wait to hear what you have to say in the new year before they think they're going to have an extra 12p loading on a litre of fuel. They must wait to hear what the Chancellor says next year.
Yes, okay. I'm afraid there are still some things that are going to be decided in the next budget. I didn't manage to do absolutely everything yesterday, but I did do a lot of things. And I hope I've given people a sense that despite these real difficulties being faced by countries all over the world, there is a plan. I just want to, because there's a lot of doom and gloom. Let me just say one thing. Look at what the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, says. They say at the end of next year, inflation comes down markedly. And then in the years that follow, we actually grow pretty healthily between 2 and 3%. That's a growth rate that we haven't seen very much of recently. So there is a way through this. It's not easy. We're taking difficult decisions, but we're doing it because it's the right thing. And I think in the end, that's what people expect from a Conservative government.
Some people found your move on electric vehicles rather unexpected, not least because, understandably, your colleagues have championed the use of them. They are greener, they are better for the environment. But of course, coming in from April 25, the VED, Vehicle Excise Duty, will be levied. Why are you not going green here, Chancellor?
The reason is because I've got an electric car myself, by the way.
Right.
By then, half of all new cars will be electric. VED is £165 a year. We've spent £2.5 billion installing charging points around the country. So I think it's reasonable to ask people who have electric cars, which I think, by the way, are fabulous, but it's reasonable to ask people to make some contribution to the costs of going green in terms of the way we motor.
We spoke a little bit with Martin Lewis, who you know well from moneysaving.com earlier in the show. He broadly said that the concerns he had for those on the lower scale had been addressed, but he has enormous worries next spring for mortgage holders, not least with the energy bills, although, of course, hopefully the weather will get a little warmer. Is there a relief plan for those who get issues with their mortgage, possibly lose their job or can't make mortgage payments?
Well, I think we have to watch this very carefully, Nick, because, when you're going into a recession, obviously the risk of repossessions is a very, very high concern. So I will continue to listen very, very carefully to what people like Martin say. I just make one broad point, though. The biggest way that we can reduce repossessions is to stop interest rates going higher and higher. And that means bringing down inflation. Interest rate hikes have actually been higher in Canada and America and New Zealand. They're going up all over the world. We need to try and constrain that growth as much as possible. And that's one of the reasons why you need to take the kind of difficult decisions that I announced yesterday.
How have we come in 55 days from swinging Britain promising the largest tax cuts in 50 years to what many are saying is the most austere package of revenue-raising and spending curbs for more than a decade? Why so?
Well, there were some mistakes in that mini-budget, and I have never pretended otherwise. I reversed it within 3 weeks of it being announced, and I've been Chancellor for 3 days. So, I accept there were some mistakes, but as a result of that, the cost of borrowing for the UK is back to the level it was before the mini-budget. And I think we've dealt with those issues. But unfortunately, the bigger issues that we face are not so easily reversible. It's the war in Ukraine. It's the long-term impact of the pandemic. And so it's going to take us longer to deal with those issues. But, deal with them we must, because people like David have got businesses to run, and they need the stability that comes with low inflation.
Can I refer you to Fraser Nelson, a commentator you'll know well, who writes in today's Daily Telegraph? Mr. Hunt plans to raise taxes to their highest level in post-war history, on the rich and on the poor, on van drivers and electric cars. If it moves, it will be taxed. If it keeps moving, it will be windfall taxed. And meanwhile, the worst recession in Europe, with living standards falling faster than any time in living memory. I make all the facts of that above correct. How do you interpret his message?
Well, what I would say to Fraser, who I may be seeing later today, by the way, but what I would say to Fraser is, in the end, in a crisis, and this is a global crisis, you have to ask what you want from a Conservative government. And the difference between Conservatives and Labour is, with really difficult choices to put the economy back on track, Conservatives take those decisions. And we've had some big shocks. We had the financial crisis of 2008. Labour were in power for a year and a half, nearly 2 years after that. And they didn't take those decisions. They left them to George Osborne. We are probably a year and a half away from the most likely date of an election. We're taking those decisions. That's the difference between Conservative and Labour. And all the things that Fraser wants and I want in terms of lower taxes are only possible if you have a stable economy that's growing. And that's why you have to take these decisions first. That's what, as I said, that's what Margaret Thatcher and Geoffrey Howe did. And I would never seek to compare myself to those extraordinary individuals, but it's taking those decisions that defines us as Conservatives.
Lastly, your final question, a decision that surprised a lot of people. The former Labour Health Secretary, Patricia Hewitt, has been drafted in to look at the NHS. This is, of course, a politician who many years ago, and who subsequently apologised, was General Secretary of an organisation that suggested the age of consent should be lowered, in some cases to the age of 10. She subsequently apologised. What's she going to bring to the NHS?
Well, I campaigned against Patricia Hewitt when she was Health Secretary over a local issue. I even camped out overnight in Parliament Square. So I've done my share of campaigning against Patricia Hewitt. But let me say this. We're giving the NHS a lot more money, £3.3 billion more a year. The NHS or health is funded the fifth highest amongst the OECD, the richer countries. And I want value for money out of every penny we give to the NHS. And I'm not going to be ideological about this. Patricia Hewitt is running the local NHS in Norfolk. She's got enormous experience. She's absolutely determined to root out waste and inefficiency. And if she can help me do that and make sure we're getting better value for money, I don't mind which party she's from. She's going to help us make the NHS better, make it more efficient, make it less wasteful. And that's what we should be doing.
Grateful for your time this morning. Chancellor of the Exchequer Jeremy Hunt appearing here on LBC. Let's get back to your calls. Got a minute or two before a full news update. Paul in Peterborough. Paul, you've been listening to that and indeed, I'm sure, reflecting on the statement you heard yesterday. Your reactions. Good morning.
I'm not happy, Nick, because I went by a petrol station earlier on today.
Yes.
And yesterday it was £1.57 a litre.
£1.57?
Yeah, it was £1.57 a litre. Petrol.
Yeah, sorry.
And today, not even 12 hours later,